Check your thermostat right now. Maybe it says 68 degrees, maybe 72. You said it once and forgot about it. But for over 300,000 years, every one of your ancestors faced the same problem every winter, and they had no thermostat, no insulation, no walls, only their hands, animal bones, and a cold so brutal it could kill a modern human in hours. So, how did they not only survive, but thrive? The answer is not what you think, and it will forever change how you look at your own home. Let's start with what the cold really felt like. We're talking minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit on the Eurasian steppe, not the kind of cold you feel walking to your car. The kind of cold where bare skin starts to die within minutes, where breathing hurts, where the wind doesn't just make you cold, it hunts you. A modern human dropped into an ice age winter without getting ready would likely be dead before sunrise. The common picture is always the same. Shivering cave people bent over a small fire, barely making it through the night. But archaeology tells a completely different story, a story about engineers. Here is the first thing archaeology got wrong about your ancestors. They mostly did not live in caves. At Castro in Russia, dating back 800,000 years, researchers found round pits up to 8 feet deep and 12 feet across. These were not natural formations. Tool marks in the soil prove they were dug on purpose to those exact depths. Why? Because 6 to 8 feet below the surface, the ground stays 20 to 30 degrees warmer than the air above it. Your ancestors did not fight the cold, they went below it. But the real skill came later at Dol Vistan in the Czech Republic 26,000 years ago. Archaeologists found winter shelters with walls made of many layers, and each one had a precise job for holding heat. The inside layer was animal hide, with the fur facing inward, trapping warm air next to bodies. Outside that was dried grass and moss, pulling moisture away. On the outside were woven mats of reed and bark. They block the wind, but they also let enough air through for moisture to escape before it could freeze and ruin the shelter from the inside. This was not simple guessing. This was careful layered heat engineering. It is the exact same idea behind the insulation in your walls today. Modern buildings use vapor barriers, insulating foam, and weatherproofing. Your Ice Age ancestors used hide, moss, and bark. The materials were different. The physics were exactly the same. Now, here is where it gets amazing. In Ukraine and Russia, at places like Mezherish and Kostenky, researchers discovered something that stunned archaeologists the first time they saw it. Houses, not caves, not windbreaks, real planned buildings made entirely from the bones of woolly mammoths. Picture this. Mammoth skulls, each weighing more than 200 pounds, used as foundation blocks. Curved tusks set into dome-shaped frames. Hundreds of smaller bones filled the gaps and gave the structure support. The whole structure was covered in layers of sewn mammoth hide, thick enough to block the wind and shaped carefully enough to let snow slide off. That is not just survival instinct. That is architecture. And test rebuilds of these houses have confirmed what the archaeology suggested. A well-built mammoth bone house could keep the inside 40 to 50 degrees warmer than the air outside by using only small fires. Modern Arctic shelters with factory-made insulation and electric heating often did no better. Let that sink in. Stone Age builders, using only bones, hide, and stone tools, matched the heat performance of modern Arctic engineering. But none of this worked without fire. And fire was not just warmth. It was the whole operating system of Ice Age winter life. The heating systems inside mammoth bone houses were advanced by any standard. A central hearth gave the main heat. Smaller hearths were placed around the edges, creating warm areas for specific tasks. Food preparation here, tool making there, babies and older people closest to the warmest spots. The layout was not random, it was planned. On the treeless steppe, wood was not always available, so your ancestors created a different fuel system. Mammoth dung was dried and prepared. Bone was processed to make it burn as well as possible. Chemical tests of hearth remains show these fuels were treated on purpose, not just thrown into a fire, but prepared to give specific amounts of heat. They were not burning just anything they could find. They were managing fuel like an important resource. And then there was ventilation. This is where modern Arctic engineers are truly impressed. Without proper airflow, moisture from breathing and cooking builds up inside any closed shelter. In below zero temperatures, that moisture freezes. The structure breaks down from the inside. Archaeological evidence at Kostenky shows carefully designed airflow systems. Small openings near ground level pulled in fresh air. Larger openings near the top let warm, moisture-filled air escape. Now, here is the part most documentaries skip completely. What happened inside these shelters after the sun went down? For hundreds of thousands of years, your ancestors went to sleep at sunset and woke before dawn. But they did not sleep the way you sleep. They slept in two phases. 4 hours, then a wakeful time of 1 to 2 hours, then 4 more hours until dawn. This was not insomnia. This was the normal human sleep pattern, recorded in history across dozens of cultures and confirmed in a 1992 experiment by psychiatrist Thomas Wehr, who found that when modern humans are kept away from all artificial light for a month, every single person automatically goes back to the same two-phase pattern. Anthropologist Paulie Wurner spent years studying the Yuhuansi Bushmen of the Kalahari, one of the last groups on Earth still living close to the original human pattern. She found that nighttime talk was completely different from daytime talk. During the day, 80% of talk was practical, plans, hunting, and resources. But at night, around the fire, 81% of conversation was stories. The campfire was the first theater, the first classroom. The famous Venus figurines found at Paleolithic sites were mostly discovered in winter shelter settings. The cave paintings linked to this time were often made during the long months of winter confinement. The art that defined our species was not made in the warmth of summer. It was made by firelight in bone houses, while the steppe outside was locked in ice. Building a mammoth bone house took 2 to 3 weeks of hard work by 8 to 10 adults, which means construction had to start in late summer or early autumn, long before conditions made outdoor work impossible. Study of tool wear and seasonal signs confirms this. These were not reactive builders. They were planners with seasonal calendars in their heads. Food storage was just as carefully designed. In permafrost regions, underground rooms connected to winter shelters by short tunnels worked like natural refrigerators, keeping meat frozen and easy to reach all winter, even during the worst storms. Clothing worked on the same layered idea as the shelters. There were multiple layers of different animal hides, and each one was chosen for a specific heat-trapping property. Wolf fur, fox fur, Arctic hare. The innermost layer trapped warm air. The outer layer pushed away wind and moisture. It used the same physics as a modern winter jacket, developed on its own out of necessity. This was 25,000 years before Gore-Tex existed, and when the shelter was damaged, which happened often, it was repaired right away. Archaeological evidence shows ongoing maintenance throughout the winter seasons. Broken bones were replaced, hide coverings were patched, and insulation was refreshed. This was not a structure they built and then just hoped would work. It was a living system they managed all the time. At the end of the Ice Age, as the climate warmed and forests spread, this whole knowledge system was abandoned. It was not lost in a catastrophe. It was just slowly no longer needed. Modern Arctic engineers studying Paleolithic shelter remains have been truly surprised. Military Arctic training programs now teach shelter building methods based on archaeological reconstructions of these 20,000-year-old designs. Disaster relief organizations have adapted these techniques for emergency shelter building in extreme environments. We lost the knowledge. Then we spent 100 years rediscovering it with modern science and learned that our ancestors had already solved it perfectly with bones and stone tools. Go back to your thermostat. The number on it shows a temperature your ancestors would have thought was miraculous. Not because they could not create warmth. They could, and they did, in conditions far harsher than anything you will ever face, but because reaching it cost them everything. Every warm night took weeks of preparation, months of planning, non-stop physical labor, and engineering knowledge so exact that one mistake could mean a family frozen before dawn. The stories you tell your children at night are the direct descendants of the myths told by firelight in bone houses on a frozen steppe. You did not invent warmth. You inherited it from the most ingenious engineers who ever lived, who had nothing but cold, time, and the refusal to die. The next time the cold comes and you reach for that thermostat without thinking, remember what it costs to get there and understand for the first time how extraordinarily rare it is to be warm.